Well, I read you were like the former defense minister of Canada.
Right.
Like, so you must, well, obviously you must know a lot of stuff. I was reading about you on the internet.
You were, eh?
And I came across some stuff about 9/11.
About 9/11, did you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not anxious to answer questions on that subject. I don't know what's on the internet, but I still stick by my statement that there are a lot of unanswered questions. And one of them, of course, is why the interceptors from Andrews Air Force Base weren't up there long before they were, and then why they were unarmed. There are a lot of things, but I haven't studied it, so I'm not an expert on the subject.
Andrews Air Force Base, which is in the heart of D.C. and the Pentagon, and it's some of the most highly protected airspace in the world, and yet at Andrews that day, they say that the reason they didn't send up planes for 95 minutes is because they were busy arming the planes with missiles. Well, why didn't they have the missiles ready to go with all this threat? Why did we do nothing to harden our defenses? Instead, we're trimming everything down. And
right, and I even hear the excuse a lot that some people are under the impression that Andrews Air Force Base didn't even have fighter jets, which is ridiculous. It's not true.
It's not true. They did, and the Syracuse base is one of the bases that offered to help, and this ties into Andrews because Syracuse said that they could have some planes in the air with some weapons within 10 minutes. So Paul Thompson in this article, he notes that even if the fighters didn't take off from Syracuse until 9:20, that would have still been enough time for those fighters to reach Washington before Flight 77 did, which hit the Pentagon. But the fighters from Syracuse, they didn't take off until over an hour and a half after their initial offer to help was given. So there's another red flag, something that makes no sense. So they could have had planes up with guns in 10 minutes. Now, the planes that eventually took off from Andrews, like 95 minutes after they knew what was going on, that 95 minutes after they saw the second strike on the World Trade Center, and there's reports that people there knew it was a terrorist attack at that point. They only took the first three planes to take off only had bullets on board, training ammunition and or bullets. And so if the excuse is that they were loading missiles, then why didn't they get those planes off sooner? Syracuse said they could have got them off the ground in 10 minutes. So there's this big gap there, and I have an article linked in there from a blogger at 9/11 Blogger named Shoestring, and it talks about the 90-minute stand down at Andrews. And there's actually a quote from a fighter pilot saying, we were just chomping at the bit. We wanted to get up there. When they finally gave us the permission to get up there, we're like bulldogs. We're fighter pilots. We were ready to go. And it's actually reported that these pilots, they were willing to, if need be, they didn't need missiles. They didn't even need bullets. They would have tried to force the planes out to sea, as Scott Sugar, who's a former U.S. Navy intelligence man, who I have an article from him called NORAD, the military screw-up that nobody talks about. He talks about how NORAD, it practices a graduated response. They can rock their wingtips. They can fire tracer ammunition in the way of the planes. They can do all these things to try to force them out to sea. And then he says, and if need be, and if the hijacker would swerve into them or whatever, they're willing to sacrifice their lives for it because it would save more lives in the end. And then, lo and behold, there's media reports that the fighters from Andrews were willing to do just that they discussed. If they needed to, they would just ram their planes into the hijacked planes. So these heroes like this were willing to do such a thing, but we didn't have them in the air, and we could have. We could have had them up there.
Right, and basic protocol would say that you would at least have the planes in the air.
Yes. Even if you're busy loading some other planes, you're going to get somebody up there, even if they don't have anything, even if they don't have any bullets or anything. And
in this case, there was nothing in the air. And as you referenced with the AWACS plane, they had even sent something that could have been an asset away.
Yeah. But then our military has other things at their disposal besides ground radar. One good example is what's called an AWACS plane. So in the Random House Unabridged Dictionary, you can find AWACS. And it defines AWACS as a sophisticated detection aircraft fitted with powerful radar and a computer capable of simultaneously tracking and plotting large numbers of low-flying aircraft at much greater distances than is possible with ground radar. Then I have a source here, and I encourage everybody that goes through this, go to the sources. I have tried to sum things up. I've tried to make it as concise as I can and not get too carried away. Even though it's quite long, I'm really summing things up quite a bit. So go to the sources. And the first source after that statement is History Commons. Great website. It used to be a different website back when they did 9/11 Press for Truth. It was on a different website. I can't even remember what it is.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Interesting red flag here is that there was an AWACS plane on a training mission in the Washington, D.C. area, but it was ordered to return to its base in Oklahoma, and this is on 9/11. So there was a plane that would have helped their communications and surveillance capabilities quite a bit, but it was sent back to its base in Oklahoma. So that's a huge red flag there, and that's something that's documented on historycommons.org. So that severely limited the communications and surveillance capabilities of the Northeast Air Defense Sector of NORAD. So that's just one of those things. That's a huge red flag right there. That it's, the type of plane that would have definitely helped them out. They sent it away. Is that just incompetence, or is it complicity? That's what we want to know. We want more answers to that. It was ordered to return to its base in Oklahoma. So, and I believe later on in the day, eventually they did bring it back out or brought another one back out, but by that time it was too late. I'm pretty sure about that, but regardless, that is something that happened a lot on 9/11, is that things happen it was just too late. We just missed it. You'll find that all the time. And I show a lot of examples here in the reference material of when you look at the overall summaries of these events, you'll find thousands of scrambles, which obviously plenty of these lead to intercepts, and Popular Mechanics claim that the majority of these intercepts in the decade before 9/11 had to do with intercepting planes suspected of smuggling drugs into the country. But when you look at these summaries, that it's always a small percentage that were jets suspected of smuggling drugs into the country, yet there are thousands of intercepts. So it's just a matter of, statistically speaking, it doesn't add up. Now, Mike Williams of the debunking website 911myths.com, he says it does seem like a pretty absolute claim, but if there are other civilian planes that were intercepted over North America, that should be easy to prove. But he only provides two other examples for comparison on his webpage concerning the Payne Stewart incident, and he couldn't find detailed information about those two, so he should know that it's difficult. Now, I also have information from a petition that was put forward to New York Attorney General Elliot Spitzer in 2004, which shows that the Keene Commission, they did no analysis, no very specific analysis of prior intercepts in the region where the attacks took place. So they didn't do the work, and we are not privy to the information. It also makes that clear, which is, this data is not available to the public. Some other information I put out there to prove this is a Freedom of Information Act request by Adian Monahan. He sent a FOIA request to the FAA, and they informed him that they do not track or keep information about the request for support of NORAD for intercepting aircraft. And then NORAD also stonewalled, and they always do, because they're not obligated to answer any Freedom of Information Act requests because they're a binational organization between the U.S. and Canada. So they're a very secretive organization. So when Mike Williams asks, how difficult could it be, the people that are worthy of that question are the government, not 9/11 investigators. I think he's
asking the wrong people.
He's asking the wrong people, for sure. He should be on our side. And he spends so much time debunking us, quote unquote. He should be fighting with us. So there was an interview that I found of his from back in 2007, and he was asked to give his strongest argument against the NORAD stand-down. So he states that the first thing is the Payne Stewart intercept time of over 70 minutes, and he states elsewhere that it's roughly 76 minutes.
76 minutes?
Says, yes, roughly. He does state that on one of his pages, that it's roughly 76 minutes. And then there's also the pre-9/11 confirmation that NORAD had only 14 fighters on alert at one time. and none of these were at Andrews Air Force Base, which is close to the Pentagon. So, first off, there's this article by Paul Thompson, who is the creator of the 9/11 timeline we were speaking about, and it's a great article I have linked in the resource material. It's called "The Failure to Defend the Skies on 9/11," and he states there that we know the details of a 1999 fighter scramble because famous golfer Payne Stewart was aboard a runaway Learjet. With the pilot unconscious, NORAD used fighters from a number of bases outside NORAD's official 7 bases to follow the plane as it crossed over several states before finally crashing. So Williams, the first point he's making here, it takes away from his second point, because, he's saying, they only had 14 fighters on alert at one time, and this proves right here with his other point about Payne Stewart that doesn't matter, because they could use fighters from numbers of bases outside of NORAD. Then they could. Right.
You said what? There was 32 bases they could have used them from.
35, I believe.
35. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. So we have this report from Aviation Week and Space Technology magazine, and they state that after the second strike on the World Trade Center, calls from fighter units started pouring into NORAD and sector operations centers asking, what can we do to help? I mean, they said the phones just all at one time after the second strike at the World Trade Center or shortly afterwards, their phones just lit up. These were fighter units calling in and offering NORAD assistance after the second strike on the World Trade Center. So the 9/11 Commission, they would assert that the military had at most 1 or 2 minutes to react to Flight 77 before it hit the Pentagon. But as I show in this material, Minetta's testimony indicates that they had 10 to 12 minutes. And so that led many to suspect that the orders were actually stand-down orders to not shoot down Flight 77. To the people that have put forward this, including myself, I think this is very interesting evidence. I don't think it's completely conclusive, but first of all, the Commission, they omitted Minetta's testimony from both their final report and the official version of the video record.
Right.
So they don't have the direct testimony for anyone to look at. As I put in the reference material, I put it there so people can read it.
It's on tape. We have Lee Hamilton asking him the questions.
Right. So it's just funny that they don't present the testimony either in the video record. But they do mention Minetta's testimony in that they do mention him. They don't repeat the testimony, but they do mention him in saying that they imply that he was mistaken by stating that the discussion between Cheney and the aide occurred later than he claimed, and that it was referencing a shoot-down order for Flight 93, which crashed in Pennsylvania. So you talked to Jim D. 3100, who is an excellent researcher, and I have a bit here from him as well, and he points out that even if the 9/11 Commission is correct when they claim, he arrived at 10:07, because Minetta makes it clear that the order was given before he got there. So even if they're right in saying that he arrived later than he says he did.
Minetta also makes it clear in his testimony to Lee Hamilton that they're talking about Flight 77.
Right. And so, but they say he arrived at 10:07, which means he couldn't have been referring to Flight 77 because it's already crashed. It crashed at 9:38. But the thing is, if he arrives at 10:07 and the order is already taken place, he's just catching a conversation about the tail end of it. The problem is that there was no shoot-down order given before 10:07. And the 9/11 Commission seems to admit this, and this is pointed out by Jim D. 3100. The shoot-down order that we know of that day was not given until 10:20, and then it wasn't relayed to the military until 10:31. So,
and that's after everything's already transpired.
Right. So, and if he got there at 10:07, but they're already talking about an order, but the shoot-down order didn't happen until almost 10 minutes later, then what was the order 10 minutes prior to that? It had to be a different order. It doesn't seem like it could be a shoot-down order for anything. So it seems to be evidence that it was a stand-down order. When you talked to Douglas F. Cochran,
when you were in the emergency ops center with Cheney, and you asked him if the orders still stand, I was just wondering, what orders were you referring to?
Okay, I'm really not. I'm not prepared to talk about this subject at all.
Oh no?
No.
Oh.